So we're at the Turley entrance. It's June 12th, almost exactly 5 months after the first time that we went in here back in January. And it's as hot outside today as it was cold back in January. And there's a bunch of air coming out of the cave. So our objective for today is to go in and survey Westcott Junction. So we're really excited to be in there. Bruce and Matt and Aaron, and we're gonna have a great trip.
So the bottom of the first drop in the Turley entrance here, we're in a little section of real fine grained limestones, if you call it a mudstone or a micrite, depending on which classification you're using. But a lot of times in these that come from sort of a deeper water, more anoxic environment, when they're forming, you'll get pyrite. And a lot of times it's microcrystalline, but sometimes you get these bigger chunks that originally could have been cubes right there, but over time they've weathered. It's sort of the same process as acid mine drainage. You get this pyrite that has been buried and contained within the rock for years and years, and when it's in there, nothing really happens. It's pretty non-reactive. But when a cave comes through, or in the example of mines, when they dig a mine through there and you get oxygen in the environment, your pyrite starts to rust. It oxidizes, breaks apart. You get iron oxide that's formed on one side. You get this sulfur that's kicked out the other end. That mixes with the water, gives you a sulfuric acid, and that's what sort of makes these pitted marks. And you can see almost a white color in there where the sulfuric acid forms out of that pyrite and then dissolves a little bit of the limestone there and sort of makes those holes. So neat, real quick and dirty geology of your Mammoth cave. So here inside the Turley entrance, we're in an area, originally when the explorers were coming through here, George Morrison, some of his men got down the entrance drops, came through the crawlway, got to this section where you have a dome pit. You've got about a 30-foot drop over here, and they had to get over to the other side. So originally, some of the remnants of the ladder that was built back in George Morrison's time are still in here. They had wooden ladders and a wooden platform that crossed over this pit. Now in the 1970s, when exploration by Don Coons and some others were going in here, they brought Jim Borden in, and he found a way to traverse around the edge of the pit here and make it up to a window on the other side. Now that's the permanent way on. They made it a little easier on themselves by installing a series of ladders, which we have now removed, but in their place we have a new option, via ferrata stairs that make it much safer and more convenient to continue along, as Matt is demonstrating.
This is cool.
That's so neat. So when we think about the intrepid explorers who are now surveying and finding new areas of Mammoth Cave and pushing to see what's around the next passage and farther down around the bend, we're sort of driven by the mystery of the unknown and the exploration aspects. What's down there? How far does this cave reach? Now, that's not an entirely new feeling. People have been doing that for a long time, as evidenced by the remnants of these ladders that George Morrison put in. They were down here driven by many of those same motivations. They wanted to know where the cave went. They wanted to know how far things went around the corners and how big it was, but they also had some additional motivations. They spent a lot of time, effort, and money to build this series of ladders that worked its way down here. And this was partly driven by something going on in the 1920s called the Central Kentucky Cave Wars. You see, they stood a chance to really earn a profitable windfall if they could find beautiful sections of cave and stuff that would rival the Mammoth Cave that for years had been given tours. So at that time when they were exploring down here, this was just another hole in the hillside, one of thousands that you find around the area here. But the hopes were always that around the next corner you'd find something very unique, very beautiful, something that would rival Mammoth Cave, and then you could bring people in and you could start to fill your own pockets. And that's why a lot of this effort went in. You can imagine how difficult it would have been to drag these long timbers through some of the crawlways above us, lower them down the shafts, nail them together in here, or assemble them outside and then have to work their way through the passageways. So they did put a lot of effort, and as time goes by, you end up with the remnants of their work. About 100 years later, they didn't quite stand the test of time, but we're happy to still have access to this area.
Still, every time we come down to here, boom!
Now, within what they called Morrison Cave, George Morrison never actually found big areas that he could commercialize and bring visitors into and make money off of like he was hoping. But that doesn't mean there aren't still many wonderful things that we noticed down here. Just a collection of a few things that are lying amongst the rocks here on the floor. We found a nice large chunk of calcite that's sitting over here. Calcite's the main mineral that makes up all these limestones that we are in, and that's the reason that these cave passageways are here. Slightly acidic rainwater will actually dissolve that calcium out of the rock, liquefies the rock, washes it on downstream, and then it can get redeposited whenever it drips slowly in places, and you make stalactites, stalagmites, and other formations that you are familiar with. So you're familiar with the mineral calcite if you've been inside of a cave before, whether you realize it or not. Now also you'll have places where just small holes or pore spaces within the rock can get filled with other types of minerals, sometimes calcite, sometimes quartz, other things, and they will form geodes or little vugs that get filled with these little crystals on the inside there. You can see you have some nice crystal growth that has grown right out in the middle of this open space. And you find these sometimes within the cave, or neat little things that we see. Another mineral that we also encounter down here is chert, and this piece of chert came off the floor. And in this chert piece, you can actually see a little bit of that purple coloration. That has to do with a little bit of fluorite that was partially entered into the crystal structure of this piece of chert when it was being deposited. Or in some instances, it's secondary. With this one specifically, I could not say, but chert is a different mineral. It's silica dioxide, the same as quartz, except it doesn't have a crystal structure. Just amorphous silica is what you have chert, and it is much less easily weathered. It's very resistant. So if you find chert inside of a cave, you'll have these ledges that stick out, and sometimes it can be sharp areas that'll grab on you as you're trying to go through. Sometimes it's in nice round balls, but it sort of sticks out as a resistant layer. And it's also a very good indicator of where you are within the stratigraphy of the cave, what section of rock you're in. Sometimes you can tell by the chert layers that you start to see. While exploration here in Mammoth Cave may be driven by the desire to know what's around the next corner and figure out where the cave goes, all of that would be useless if we didn't have a way of plotting out where it's going. So we survey and we map all these passageways as we go through them. Here at Mammoth Cave, we have the standard where we actually survey as we go. We don't go for long periods of time just exploring what we call scooping cave without surveying it. Because then you sort of get the thrill of that new discovery without actually putting in the work of mapping it out and figure out where it's going. So we do those both together. Part of the reason is, maybe you went down a passageway for 5 or 10 minutes, and if it was a long, miserable crawlway and it just ended and it didn't continue on, it would be real hard to convince somebody to go back there and map out this crawlway without the opportunity that it opened up into something bigger. So we do that just to make sure we get as much of this cave mapped as we can as we go along and we see it. Now, the area that we're getting into here is kind of a complex junction, and originally it was mapped through here using the best methods at the time. Decades ago, they were using compasses, stretching a measuring tape, and as time goes by, they eventually started using clinometers, getting that put down on paper. Now we have different laser mapping equipment that we can use, actually laser range finders that do your compass bearings and your inclinometer. So that gets your horizontal angles and your vertical angles. We sketch all that down on paper and eventually transfer that into computer programs. So as we're moving along, all these get referenced back to the entrances that have GIS locations or GPS locations. So you can put them into a GIS and figure out where exactly these sections of the cave are with reference to what's on the surface. So we're in an area right now that is somewhat complex, where you have a lot of different passageways leading off in different directions. This is one of the first sections where it's getting really big down here inside the Turley entrance of Morrison Cave. And from this location, you can branch off into multiple sections of the cave. Now we call this place Westcott Junction. It's been named so after Michael and Maria Westcott, the property owners. Maria is actually the granddaughter of Mr. Turley, who the entrance was named after. And we're going to be starting our survey today, resurveying some of the old passageways from this location and adding and picking up some new stuff that wasn't on the original map.
$27.3, 206.3, plus 6.4.
So Bruce, you've been in Turley entrance a few times now, and today you got to go see some of the cave further out. What are your thoughts?
Well, pardon me if I catch my breath for a moment. From basically below my feet right here, approximately 70 feet down, takes you into a solid floor you can stand on. And from there, we'd spent many trips working our way through some, I think it'd be safe to say, less friendly portions of the cave. And today was my first time actually being able to see some of the large, impressive passageways beyond. And there are some just amazing sections. Beautiful vertical shafts, picturesque, just round, smooth walls, waterfalls. It's very, very impressive section of cave.